Welcome to ET Times, I am Jenny Lewis. In today's issue of the Wall Street Journal, a rare article appears from U.S. Intelligence Director John Ratcliffe. This is because the man in this position, who has the most information in the world, generally provides only the president and a handful of his senior staff with intelligence analysis to help make decisions. John begins his article by pointing out that all of the intelligence on the Chinese Communist Party shows a clear line that Beijing is trying to dominate the United States and the rest of the world economically, militarily, and technologically. The Communist Party's commercial espionage policy is even clearer: to plunder and plagiarize all of America's advanced technology, and then to have its counterpart in China take over from the United States, eventually bringing down American companies and taking over the world. Huawei's 5G is a vivid example of the Chinese Communist Party's wolfish ambitions. Although Huawei can't even make a simple chip, it wants to attract business all over the world, monopolize 5G technology, and control the world's data transit business, thus monitoring every move of mankind. The reason why U.S. Intelligence Director John is uncharacteristically openly shouting at the American people and the public through the public media is clearly because he believes the situation is urgent. As he points out in his article, the United States is at a critical juncture, and political leaders must put aside their partisan differences and current antagonisms and work together to confront the most dangerous enemy in the world, the Chinese Communist Party. William Evanina, director of the National Counterintelligence and Security Center, also emphasized today that the CCP's recent intelligence activities have been like an injection of steroids, very active, and that the American community must be on high alert. It is believed that there are up to 370,000 Chinese students in the United States, some of whom are members of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, or children of CCP officials. The CCP clearly demands that all Chinese have the obligation to obey the leadership of the party and to provide information as requested by party and government authorities. Moreover, some of these people are the children of high-ranking party, government, and military officials who belong to the ruling class of the Communist Party of China and are likely to work for the Communist Party. The U.S. media also reported yesterday that more than 1,000 Chinese scholars who concealed their military backgrounds from the Chinese Communist Party have quietly left the U.S. These military scholars are, of course, spies. And they are military technology spies. If you include spies from other systems, there are at least 10,000 Chinese spies who have recently fled the United States. The FBI is currently investigating more than 5,000 espionage cases related to the Chinese Communist Party. Any Chinese suspects who might be under FBI surveillance would, of course, have to retreat en masse and be replaced by new spies. Communist countries ruled by spies and used to hire large numbers of spies, special agents, and radicals to conduct multi-level, all-encompassing surveillance and intelligence-gathering activities around the world. The Chinese Communist Party has even been able to access the U.S. funeral industry information network through big data and various Chinese software to collect information about the dead in the U.S. This is not just a trick. This is not fooling around, but this time the pro-communist extremists in the Democratic Party in the United States are using this seemingly useless information provided by the Chinese Communist Party to fake hundreds of thousands of fake ballots, and using phantom ballots to help the Biden team cheat and obtain a large number of illegal votes. On December 2nd at 4 p.m. local time, President Donald Trump delivered a nearly 50-minute speech at the White House in what he considered the most important speech of his presidency, in which he sent a clear message to Americans and to the world. First, the greatest privilege that Americans should have, the right to vote, has been stolen, and the American electoral system has been deliberately attacked and besieged. In other words, the election was a long-planned fraudulent election that undoubtedly violated the U.S. Constitution. He then spent a great deal of time in his speech confirming that they seem to know the outcome of this election, and they have it all under control, detailing the enormous voter fraud and irregularities that occurred in the long, absurd election of November 3rd, saying that a lot of bad things have happened in this absurd period, citing the various ways in which fraud was committed in various swing states, and the fact that the Democrats implemented massive mail-in ballots and other schemes to steal the election results. As the president of the most powerful country in the world, the fact that Trump, in such a public way, characterized the 2020 election as fraudulent and named the fraudsters is in itself very telling. That is, the Trump administration is telling Americans, Democrats, the world, and the countries and dignitaries who recognized Biden's election that they already have solid evidence, and the evidence he listed is only part of it, in an official way. In addition, it is a message to Americans that election fraud challenges not only Trump and the average American voter, but also the U.S. Constitution. Second, since the American people's right to vote has been stolen, the electoral system has been attacked and besieged, and the Constitution has been challenged. This has essentially involved the future direction of the United States. As the President of the United States, Donald Trump has the responsibility to step forward. As President, I have no higher duty than to defend the laws of the United States and the Constitution, Trump said. That's why I'm determined to protect our election system. He also borrowed congratulatory words from others, mentioning his many past accomplishments, but in contrast to them, they believed that the greatest accomplishment Trump would achieve during his term was getting back the integrity of our nation's elections. Trump agrees, saying, if this unprecedented level of election fraud is not eliminated, America will cease to exist. So he will, with the support of the people, return fairness and integrity to our elections, and restore trust in our government. It should be noted that in the past nearly 4 years of his administration, Trump has made remarkable achievements in the economy, foreign affairs, domestic affairs and other areas. Not only he mentioned the largest tax cuts in U.S. history, the largest regulatory government cuts, the rebuilding of the military, taking care of veterans more than ever, and the establishment of the Air Force, and so on. Statistics show that since Trump took office, economic growth has skyrocketed every year, and the U.S. unemployment rate has fallen to its lowest point since the late 1960s. However, at this time Trump said, his greatest achievement will be to get back the integrity of the United States elections, because if he cannot remove this unprecedented election fraud, the United States will have no future, and this is by no means alarmist. It's because he is not only fighting for himself, but also fighting for the American people, but also for the future of America. On the afternoon of December 2nd, Powell and attorney Lin Wood held a joint press conference in Georgia. During the press conference, Wood repeated several times that this election is a repeat of 1776, and that the far left of the Democratic Party is trying to steal this country, which the American people own, to take back from the American people and defend America as a free and democratic nation. In several tweets on the same day, Lin Wood vowed to unearth the traitors who took money from the Chinese communists, Soros or Bill Gates to rig U.S. elections and warned that American freedom was facing extinction, and that it's time for civil disobedience. For his part, Powell wept as he called for the time has come for every patriot in our country to stand up, to be heard, and to be counted. Let us be able to continue to move forward every day and continue to stand up for the truth. Americans and people around the world have a stake in freedom, and that's what these people want to take away from us. Third, acts of harm to American interests and to the president and members of his team will not go unnoticed. It is noteworthy that, when talking about election fraud, Trump specifically mentioned the Russi agate frame-up and the political persecution of members of his administration. According to him, these entrenched interests are against our movement because we put America first. They don't put America first, and we want to give power back to you, the American people. They don't want America first, they just want power for themselves. They want to make money, and that's why they don't want me to be your president. There is no doubt that Trump is suggesting that these interests are closely linked to election fraud. Will these interests continue to get away with it? Trump's answer: so many people have used lies, leaks and all sorts of illegal tactics to hurt the President of the United States, it can't just go away. It's hard for me to explain to people why those who spied on my campaign and were caught in the act are still getting away with it. It's unprecedented and should never happen to the President of the United States in the future. Clearly, Trump is telling these interest groups that they will pay for what they have done and that they will not go away and they will not get away with it. By sending these unusual signals, Trump is, in fact, setting the stage for his upcoming heavyweight actions to defend the laws and Constitution of the United States and remove the forces behind election fraud. So, what actions will Trump likely take? Previously exposed evidence and many analyses have long pointed out that the external forces promoting fraud in the U.S. election are mainly the Chinese Communist Party, while the internal forces are the deep-rooted U.S. government and leftist forces colluding with the CCP. In response to the Chinese Communist Party, the Trump administration has recently made a number of major moves, including the issuance of the executive order on responding to the threat of securities and investments financed by the Chinese Communist Party's military-industrial enterprises to address the threat posed by the CCP, the initiation of actions to cut off the CCP's money from the U.S. financial markets, the juxtaposition of the CCP regime with Iranian terrorism. The issuance of the China the Foreign Corporation Accountability Act was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives and will take effect upon Trump's signature, further choking off the possibility of listing Chinese communist companies in the U.S. financial markets for money-making purposes, and further restricting visas for Chinese Communist Party members and their families, and so on. From the recent signal released by top U.S. Attorney Linwood, Trump's big weapon against the Chinese Communist Party in the foreseeable future is to activate his executive order implementing certain sanctions in the event of foreign intervention in the U.S. election, issued on September 12, 2018, declaring a state of national emergency and increasing the intensity of sanctions against the Chinese Communist Party. For the American deep government, leftist forces, Trump is still taking legal means, hoping that through hearings and judicial procedures, the Congress, judges to defend the law and the Constitution, respect public opinion, to confirm the election fraud, and then remove illegal votes to give the American people a fair result. For this reason, Trump is ready to accept any accurate election results, and he believes he will win because we have tens of thousands of votes, more than the number of votes needed to reverse the results of these states we're talking about. From the inaction of the Department of Justice and the refusal of some judges to admit fraud, to the deliberate suppression of news about Trump and fraud by high-tech companies and the media, we can see how deep the penetration of the Chinese Communist Party and the deep-seated government is. In these extraordinary times, Trump can also take extraordinary measures. Recently, Linwood, General Flynn, former Air Force Lieutenant General McInerney, and others have spoken out in the media, calling on Trump to immediately declare martial law and impose military control, suspend habeas corpus, make mass arrests and court-martial traitors, and immediately recount the election by hand. From Trump's recent efforts to clean up the Defense Department swamp, appoint a new acting Defense Secretary Miller, have special forces report directly to him, pardon General Flynn, who was framed by Rusi Agate, and replace 11 establishment members of the Defense Policy Board, including former Secretary of State Kissinger, to his most important speeches that can't just let it go. Message does not preclude Trump from taking this heavy action.
By mail-in ballot, congratulations. We received a ballot, so you can no longer vote. They didn't know what to do. They had no one to complain to. Most just left and said, that's strange. But many people complained and complained vehemently. And in a lot of cases, they filled out a provisional ballot, which was almost never used, but in virtually every case was a vote for Trump. In other words, they went in to vote, and they were told that they voted. And they didn't vote. And they left, and they felt horror. And they lost respect for our system. And this happened tens of thousands of times all over the country. That's how desperate the Democrats were. They would fill out ballots of people not even knowing if these people were going to show up. And when they did show up, they said, sorry, you've already voted. And on top of everything else, we have a company that's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With the turn of a dial or the change of a chip, you can press a button for Trump and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of a system is this? We have to go to paper. Maybe it takes longer, but the only secure system is paper. Not these systems that nobody understands, including, in many cases, the people that run them, although unfortunately, I think they understand them far too well. In one Michigan county, as an example, that used Dominion systems, they found that nearly 6,000 votes had been wrongly switched